Hello, good evening, good day, everybody, and welcome to the Ask Abhijit show. Today is episode 237, live on YouTube. I hope everyone's doing excellent, everyone's doing great. Today, I'm going to take questions that you have asked in the comments, and then, if there is time, I will take questions from the live chat as well, if possible. But before that, let me see who all is there on the live stream today. I can see lots of people. Uh, I can see Devansh Singla. I can see Krishna Govinda, Alfred Raghunath, Buldev Rai, Uddhav Pratap Vora, Surinder Gupta, Aditya Kumar Singh, Happy Soul, Kulesh Tanju, Krish Gupta, Rangers, Wolf, Geopolitical Dubey from Indore, Pranav Soni, GR, Surinder Gupta, Zishan, HZ Gaming, Feminist Hunter, Shivansh Shankar, Pratham Agarwal, Tanay Chandra, Rekha Humble, Kini R, Ashish Pandel, Vidhi Manyar, Vikram Adi, Mr. 88ers, Om 1813, Sahej Deer, Akash B.A., Devansh Singla, Bloodmonger, Creatin, Happy Soul, Sergeant Skylan, Abhiram, Ankur Sharaf, Pranav Soni, Kappa Lane, Raunak Rai, Samarth Tripathi, Shreyas Mitra, Uddhav Pratak Vora, Vanos Spot, Feminist Hunter, Vinay Krishna, Suryansh Kapil, Kalyani Deshmukh, Tanay Chandra, Somi Jain, Tejas B, Pranay Paul from Kolkata, Vikram Adi, Zubon Izang, Sunil Chavre, Shagun Chopra, hello. Utsav, hello. Diddy's Dudu, Pratham, Geopolitical Dubi again. Sahil, Matteo Perez from Texas, Sapratim Datta, Avishek Chakraborty from Bangladesh, Adi Hari, Sangram Nayak, SN Prakhar Gupta, Rithun Nair, Rithun Rayar, Prashant Bolian, Joel Jose, Udbhav Sharma, Meet Butt, Ordi, Blitz Ray, YT, Pratham Agarwal, David Umong Bai, you know who from Kolkata, Palab from Kolkata, Mr. McLovin, Anjali Mary, and so many other people. So, good evening to all of you. Good day to all of you, wherever you are. And let's get going with the questions. What questions do we have today? And we have a question from Geopolitical Dubai. Will scientists be ever able to predict earthquakes? Will there ever be such technology that can allow scientists to predict earthquakes? So there was an earthquake, I think yesterday, I think, right? Or day before yesterday, on the border of Myanmar and Thailand. It was a 7.7 earthquake on the Richter scale, and it caused a lot of damage. So it would be great if you could predict earthquakes, right? Then we could alert people beforehand, and it would save a lot of lives and possibly some property as well. But as of today, we don't have the means to predict earthquakes. Will it be possible in the future? So to understand that, let's understand what is the mechanism that causes earthquakes. In a way, it's like making meteorological forecasts and predictions. When is it going to rain in a certain part of the world? What kind of weather conditions will we have? And we have a lot of weather data patterns that we collect, and we feed into supercomputers, and these computers then do the modeling, and they are able to give us the predictions of the next few days when it comes to weather across the world, the weather patterns. So to make these predictions, these softwares, these computers, etc., these programs, they need a tremendous amount of data, real-time data, evolving data, that allows them to hone the model and to make predictions into the future. And these predictions typically work for the next few days, but if you want to make a prediction for a week or 2 weeks down the line, it may be something that's still very difficult to do, and it may not be very accurate. So to make predictions of weather in the atmosphere, we need tremendous amounts of data of the weather that exists currently. Now, earthquakes are caused by tectonic activity, by the movements of tectonic plates under the surface of the earth. These tectonic plates are masses of the earth's crust that move very slowly over time, and they collide, they grind past each other, they move over each other, some slide under another. So sometimes you have one plate sliding another plate, and these movements are what cause earthquakes. These movements are caused by the flow of magma in the internal part of the earth, below the mantle of the earth. Yeah, I'll not go and show you the diagram of the cross section of the earth, but that's how it works. So to be able to make predictions of future earthquakes, you need a tremendous amount of data, of uh, the kind of activity that's happening under the Earth's surface. You'll need a lot of data about the flow of the magma in below the mantle of the Earth, and you'll need data of the mantle of the Earth too. That too, and that's all subsurface data about parts of the Earth that are hundreds of kilometers below the surface, tens of kilometers at least, and we don't have sensors down there. You would need tens of thousands of sensors at varying depths under the Earth's surface to be able to make reliable predictions of what's going to happen in a certain part of the world. Will there be an earthquake, especially in the parts of the world that are called the that are seismically active, tectonically active areas, where you have intersections of various tectonic plates. And one of these areas is called the Ring of Fire. The area from the Andaman Sea all the way to Indonesia, through Indonesia, and all the way to Japan and New Zealand, and even the Andes region and of the Americas, and the Rocky Mountains regions, and so on and so forth. So you will need a tremendous amount of sensors, number of sensors, tens of thousands of sensors under the Earth's surface at various points under the Earth's surface, all feeding you data in real time. And more than that, you may need data about the movements, about the activity of the magma layer that's way below the mantle of the Earth, and that's essentially impossible to do in today's scenario. And because we don't have any of this data, that's why we cannot really make any accurate predictions of earthquakes. In the future, it may be possible, but at this point in time, it's next to impossible to do that. And that's why earthquakes are still a huge problem. But typically, earthquakes happen in tectonically active regions, parts of the Earth. This earthquake that happened a couple of days ago on the border between Myanmar and Thailand, that's unusual. That's not a part of the world that's typically prone to earthquakes. So that was unusual. But yeah, generally, when you are living in an earthquake-prone region, you take precautions on a daily basis. You construct buildings that are resilient and that will be able to withstand earthquakes of whatever magnitude, maybe 7 or 8 or whatever. In Japan, I think you need to be able to withstand earthquakes of at least 8 on the Richter scale, if not higher, and so on. So people who live in such areas, they take precautions, but it's always good to be able to predict earthquakes, which we currently are not able to do. In the future, it may be possible, but right now it's not quite possible. Next question is by Infinite406. And Infinite406 says, choose one. History edition, which is superior, Athens versus Spartans? I would say Athens because Athens won in the end. The Spartans did win the Peloponnesian War, but Athens did make a comeback, let's say, in 100 years' time. And over the long term, Athens was the one that lasted more. So I would say Athens. Yeah, but the Spartans obviously were superior in their military tactics and strategies and their militaristic lifestyle. But overall, I would say Athens was superior because it was a more well-rounded culture, more well-rounded city-state, more culturally relevant than Sparta. Sparta was one-dimensional, all militaristic. Athens had other stuff as well. I would say overall Athens would be superior. The Achaemenid Empire versus the Magadha Empire. The Magadha Empire is the one that preceded the Mauryan Empire. I would say, look, the Magadha Empire conquered most of the subcontinent, right? Large part of the subcontinent. The Achaemenids, the thing about the Achaemenids and various Indian empires, whether it's the Magadha or the Mauryan Empire, is that they were never adversaries. You see, Indian empires like the Mauryan Empire or the Magadha Empire, they never tried to expand beyond the subcontinent. They only wanted to unify the subcontinent under one political rule, which was theirs. When it comes to the Achaemenid Empire, they were expansionists, but they never ever expanded eastwards towards India. They always fought the empires to the west, whether it's the Greeks or whoever, right? So I would say it's a tie. Achaemenids versus Magad or Maurya. It's a tie. Chandragupta Maurya versus Caesar. Chandragupta Maurya is the founder of the Maurya Empire, of the Maurya dynasty. He had the help of his great mentor, Shri Vishnugupta Chanakya, and he established the beginnings of an empire that would eventually be the greatest empire we ever saw in the subcontinent, more or less. Not probably the greatest. Maybe the Kushan empire was greater, but okay. It was one of the greatest of all empires in the subcontinent. and it gave rise to this great cultural efflorescence and so on and so forth, right? So uh, so the founder was Chandragupta Maurya. When it comes to Caesar, he was a military conqueror, and he conquered a vast territory, probably larger than the subcontinent. So from a purely expansionist perspective, from a territorial conquest perspective, Caesar was greater. He was one of the greatest generals of all time. But from a civilizational perspective, I would say Chandragupta was greater. So it depends on which way you look at it. Caesar was a conqueror. He was interested in conquest, in wealth. Why did he conquer? Because it gave him vast amounts of territory from which to extract resources, like Hispania, from which he got a tremendous amount of gold, and so on. And that increases prestige in Rome. And his overall objective was to be the number one man in Rome, and that's why he conquered so much. And because he had all these legions at his disposal, and legions, to maintain legions, you need a tremendous amount of resources and money. That's also another reason for behind his conquests. But his conquests were incredibly destructive. They resulted in what you would today call genocide. So yeah, but from a conquest perspective, Caesar was greater. From an all-round perspective, I would say perhaps Chandragupta Maurya was greater, perhaps. So it depends on which way you look at it. Next, Samudragupta versus Napoleon. Samudragupta knew when to stop. His entire life, his entire career as emperor was one extended military campaign, and he conquered the whole of the subcontinent. He subdued all the kingdoms to the south, north, everywhere. He launched a dual conquest of the south part of India, which was a land-based conquest with a parallel naval conquest. So he was one of the all-time greats, Samudragupta. Napoleon. So Samudragupta wanted to unify the subcontinent, and he did not engage in wanton destruction and all that. Napoleon just wanted to rule the world. He did not know where to stop, and that is what eventually led to his downfall. I would say Samudragupta was greater. He was a much greater ruler, and he was, I would say, as good or if not better than Napoleon in his military strategies and tactics and the way he conducted his conquests. So I would say Samudragupta wins that. Breaking Bad versus True Detective season one. I would say I've seen both actually. I've seen Breaking Bad. I've seen True Detective season one. True Detective season one is probably one of the greatest pieces of cinema. Is it cinema? It's a TV series. It was great. It's pretty dark. It's about serial killers and stuff, but it's really well made. But overall, I would say Breaking Bad is superior because it lasted, I don't know how many, 5 6 seasons, whatever it was. I think overall sustained excellence, you saw that in Breaking Bad. When it comes to True Detective, the subsequent seasons I hear aren't that good. Uh, Nietzsche versus egalitarian philosophy. Look, I am no great fan of Nietzsche or whatever, but if you were to talk about Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy, uh, what comes to mind? God is dead. He famously proclaimed that God is dead. He said that the rise of science and secularism in the West, in the world, was causing the decline of religious belief, and this has created a crisis of values, crisis of meaning, crisis of what's the purpose of life, all of that. So he said God is dead. He said that we are now living in a world that has no inherent meaning, it has no inherent purpose. He called it nihilism, and he believed that it could perhaps be a starting point for creating new values and meaning, but I'm not sure where we have gone with that. And he spoke about something called the will to power. He said that there is a fundamental drive in all living beings, in all living things. We called it the will to power, which is your personal quest, your personal striving for growth, for overcoming your own limitations and all that. So he called that the will to power. And he also came up with this concept of the Übermensch, the Superman, which is this concept of a higher or more powerful type of human being who's able to create their own values and live according to their own values and according to their own will. Okay, and impose their will on the world and create and give the world purpose and meaning and all of that. So these are the things that Nietzsche spoke about. There's a lot more to Nietzsche than just this. So that's Nietzsche. He said that the world is not that he said that all humans aren't equal. He did not believe in equality. He said that some are superior, some are not, and it depends on how you live your life. And if you have the will to power, how much of the will to power you have. Everyone doesn't have the same will to power. Some people have low agency. They will just be passive spectators in life. They will be supporting characters. And some people have more agency. They'll get things done no matter what. They'll find a way. And these are the heroes, the in life, the central characters in life, right? So all people aren't equal. Nietzsche did not believe in equality, and egalitarian philosophy says that everyone is equal and all, and so on and so forth. Listen, what do I believe? I believe that everybody should have the same rights. Everybody should have the same rights and should be treated the same as per whatever principles we live by, whether it is law, constitution, or whatever. Everybody should have the same starting point and the same treatment. But I don't believe all humans are equal. I mean, look at human beings around you. Some are tall, some are short, some are more intelligent, some are less intelligent, some are richer, some are poorer, some are just capable of doing more, some are not so capable. So egalitarian philosophy, uh, the foundations are good. Everybody should be given the same rights, no matter what is their lineage, what is their status at birth, whatever parentage they come from, whatever their so-called class in society. Everybody should get the same rights and all. I completely believe in that. But I also don't believe that all humans are equal. Some people are just different. Everyone's different, right? I mean, why do we have the Olympics? Why do we have the World Cup? It's not to celebrate equality, it's to celebrate inequality. It's to celebrate those who are the best. They are the ones who win. The second, the runners-up medal is not the medal you want. You want the winner's medal. So yeah, so I would say I would probably go a little bit more with Nietzsche than with egalitarian philosophy. But I do agree with the fact that everybody should have the same rights and same treatment, right? And good treatment and good rights. Yeah. Darwinian society versus dharmic society. Obviously, a dharmic society. Darwinian principles do apply to the world. Obviously, the survival of the fittest, the ones who strive more, do better, and so on. But dharmic philosophy means everybody should be treated with compassion and so on. So it's kind of a continuation of the previous one. I would obviously always go for a dharmic society, right? Okay. Okay, this is a big question. Imran says, can you explain, sir, why these kinds of things happen? What things? Let's see. If you read the Shahnameh of Ferdawsi, the author mentioned an area called Ariana, yes, and its cities and palaces. He mentioned Ariana's palaces like Kabulistan, Tukharistan, Zabulistan, Ghazni, Ghor, Bamiyan. All of these exist in present-day Afghanistan, not Iran. And he has written the names of two large kingdoms, which are Ariana and Paros, which is Persia, like two different countries. Yeah, he kind of may have done that. Yeah, and he also said that people of Ariana speak the Dari language, and the people of Pars speak Persian language, Parsi language. In most of the poems, is written like Mardas's story, stanza 9, whatever that is. I don't know how to read that. I used to be able to, but no longer. So in English, it says it's inappropriate for us to say Bivar 10,000 in Parsi language. It's better for us to say Daha Hazar 10,000 in the Dari language. According to these verses, Dari language was not the language of Pars, and the Parsi language is extinct by empires of Ariana. Yet both are the same language family but different languages. Because of this, the king of Persia, Reza Shah Pahlavi, changed his country's name Persia to Iran and the language name Dari to Persians for making the history richer and richer. In the Shahnameh, the details are very clear. Okay, very interesting story you bring in. What's the deal with the Shahnameh? Right, the Shahnameh was written by Ferdowsi. It was written between about 980 AD to about 1010 AD, over a period of about 30 years. It was written by Ferdowsi. Now, when Ferdowsi started writing this book, the Shahnameh, the record of the kings of Persia, the record of the entire history of Persia, when he started writing this, the geopolitical entity in power in Persia, in the region, was the Samanid Empire, which was a Persian empire. But around the late 990s, maybe around 999 AD or somewhere around that time, the Samanid Empire was overthrown by a Turkic empire, the Ghaznavid Empire. Mahmud of Ghazni, that guy, the Turk, who has a pretty dark history in India. We know that. So, so the Ghaznavi Empire takes over from the Samanid Empire, and Mahmud of Ghazni kind of becomes the patron of Ferdowsi. And then Ferdowsi continues writing the Shahnameh, and he concludes around 1010 AD. Now, when you have a patron who is this conqueror, a foreigner, a Turk, not a Persian, you will find that Mahmud of Ghazni would have been less interested in tales from Persian history. He would not have been interested in that. He would have been interested in self glorification. And he would have expected that the writer of the Shahnameh, Ferdowsi, would glorify him and the region he came from. And the region he came from was present day Afghanistan. He occupied Afghanistan. He was a foreigner, even in Afghanistan. He was a Turk. He was not Afghan. He was not Pashtun. He was a Turk. So, so you have to understand that the Shahnameh cannot be treated as a completely factual book. There was politics at the time that would have encouraged, let's say, Ferdowsi to kind of write things in a certain manner. But it's also true, like you say, that a lot of these places that he talks about are present day Afghanistan, not present day Persia. And that's just the way it is. So my point is, you cannot take uh, the Shahnameh as a completely historical, absolutely unquestionable historical text. Uh, and a lot of the stuff is kind of, look, I'll tell you what. Ferdowsi was not a big fan of the Arabs. He was not even a big fan of the Turks, but he had to operate under those circumstances. He was not even a Muslim, by the way, Ferdowsi. He did not write very nice things about the Arabs who conquered Persia. He wrote pretty sad things, about the condition that Persia was in under Arabic rule, and then all of that. Um, so you have to understand there's layers of things over here. And if you look at the Shahnameh of Ferdowsi, he essentially, if you look at the origins of Persia mentioned in the Shahnameh, they're very interesting. Let's bring an English version of the Shahnameh on the screen and just take a look at what's written. A little bit of that. Uh, where is the Shahnameh? Shahnameh, the Shahnameh, the epic of kings. Let's make it like this. Okay, so it starts with the origin of Persia essentially, and it talks about the first king Kayumers, and what happens after that. Then you have Husheng and Tahumers, and after Tahumers, Takhta Jamshed, you have Jamshed. So Jamshed is Yamaksheta, Yama. It is Yama of the Rig Veda. Then, if we go further beyond that, there is Zahak, and Zahak is depicted as a dragon, a snake, and the person who destroys eventually Zahak is a person who is referred to as Faridun in this text. Faridun, right? Faridun, the person who Ferdowsi refers to as Faridun, was originally called Tretun in Persian. And Tretun is also called Aptya Tretun. And it is the same person as a so called minor divinity in the Rig Veda, which is Aptya Treta. And if you read the Rig Veda, it's kind of interesting because Aptya Treta is at times portrayed fighting the great serpent Vritra. And of course, it is Indra who destroys Vritra, but over here it is Treta in the Shahnameh who destroys this serpent, Zahak, who is an Arabic version of Vritra, and so on. So if you look at the original, if you look at the initial portion of the Shahnameh, it kind of mirrors the original texts of India, which tells you that there was a very deep, ancient, common origin of the Persians and the Indians. Right, so it's like that. My point overall is to what you mentioned. You have to be careful in interpreting the Shahnameh. It's a complicated text, and the way it was written, it was influenced by the politics of the time, and Ferdowsi had to kind of take special care to make his overlord Mahmud of Ghazni happy, to keep him happy, and for that he had to. It is alleged that Mahmud of Ghazni promised to give Ferdowsi one gold coin for each verse or something that he wrote in the Shahnameh. And to get that, obviously, he has to write things that make this king happy, right? So it could have influenced the way the Shahnameh was written. So it is not. It is. I mean, it is the oldest text in the Persian language that we have today, whether you call it Dari or whatever. Yeah, Dari. There are definitely two versions of Persian, very similar languages. One is the Persian that is spoken in Afghanistan, which is called Dari, and then you have the Persian language. There may be some dissimilarities, but overall they're part of the same language family, like you say. But so the Shahnameh is the only ancient text from Persia essentially that survives. Persia would have had lots of ancient texts, Zoroastrian texts, etc., which would have been destroyed by the Arabs when they conquered Persia. So Persia's downfall essentially started with the conquest of Alexander, which destroyed the Achaemenid Empire, and they took the Greeks took out all of the wealth from Parshapur, Persepolis. They melted all the gold, all the silver. They would have destroyed. They burned Parshapur, which would have burned all the books and all. So a lot of the ancient history of Persia is destroyed because of all of this, and that's why kind of the oldest text that is available for reference is the Shahnameh. But you have to be careful with reading it. You cannot interpret it literally. That's the point. Okay, questions about the immigration, the foreigner in immigration bill, Boruto Uchiha and Prakhar Gupta. What's your take on the new foreigner and immigration bill? And what are your views on the latest immigration foreigners bill 2025 introduced by the government of India in the parliament? Do you think it will be effective in preventing illegal immigration in India? So let's take a look at this bill. I have found the bill. Let's put that on the screen and let's briefly take a look at what this bill says. Let's take this out and we can see the whole thing. So this is the bill, and it has various chapters and various sections and clauses and so on. This is what the bill is. So now what does this bill say is the question. So if you look at clause 20, where is clause 20? Let's go all the way down to clause 20. Where is clause 20? This is clause 20. So this essentially broadly defines what constitutes contravention of this act, including being in India without valid documentation. That's clause 20. Clause 21, it essentially provides for penalties for being in India without valid travel documents, up to 5 years imprisonment and 5 lakh rupees fine. Then you have clause 23, clause 23A, which addresses foreigners who remain in any area in India for a period extending the period for which the visa was issued, and who stay in India without a valid passport or without travel documents. Then there is a clause 29. Let's look at clause 29. It essentially empowers the central government to direct the removal of a foreigner from India for a contravention of any of the provisions of this act. So we can deport people who contravene the provisions of this act. So this essentially provides a mechanism to the government of India for the deportation of illegal immigrants. Now, if you go back upstairs to where is the clause 16? Is it clause 16? So clause 16 essentially puts the burden of proof of proving that that a person is not a foreigner on the individual concerned. So this makes it more challenging for undocumented illegal immigrants to contest any actions taken by the government in court. You go to the court and say that the government is doing this, it is very oppressive. Then the burden of proof is on the person to prove that this person is not a foreigner, right? Then what else do we have? So essentially, foreigners, according to this act, foreigners who are ordered to leave can be required to be kept in specific places set aside for illegal foreigners. This bill provides for the regulation of these facilities, like maintenance and discipline and all that. Then so these provisions, they create a framework for holding foreigners in a certain place pending their removal. Let's look at some more clauses of this act. Clause 33. Where is clause 33? It's here. So clause 33 gives the central government powers to exempt any person or class of people from the provisions of the act. So you could create theoretically you could create some provisions, some exemptions for certain categories of illegal immigrants if you want. Let's say you have Tibetans who have come into India in the past, without valid travel documents, fleeing from Chinese occupied Tibet. So maybe you could create an exemption for those people if the government so desires, right? And so on. So essentially, this act, it's a good act, I would say. Yeah, the emphasis is on providing the government with various broad powers It will provide the government various broad powers to remove illegal immigrants, and it places significant responsibilities on carriers who transported these individuals into India. But I don't, as far as I've seen, it doesn't seem to have any special provisions for addressing the very complicated issue of long term illegal infiltrators who are residing in India. People who have been residing in India for 40, 50 years, and their descendants are also living in India. I don't see, thus far, I have not seen anything that, any kind of provision for addressing that situation. So when you have Bangladeshis who have been illegal, who have illegally come into India and who have been living in India for 30, 40, 50, whatever years, their descendants, their children, grandchildren are also living in India. How to deal with that situation? Because we'll have millions of those, maybe 100 million of those. What do we do with that, with those people? How do we address that situation? I'm not sure I've seen a solution or any provision for that. The same goes with the tens, with the hundreds of thousands of cookies who have come into India in the past few decades. What to do with them? So it's a good start, I would say, but maybe a little more maybe required when it comes to addressing those large challenges that we face. I mean, the biggest problem we have in India is that maybe 100 million illegal infiltrators who are residing in various parts of India, who've been settled all across the country, and who have fake documentation, which may actually not be fake. They may have illegally obtained real documentation, Aadhaar cards and whatnot. How do we deal with that? So I think it's a good start, and kudos to the government for doing that. And let's see how they deal with the bigger problems. Hopefully, using this bill, or maybe some other measure. We'll see about that. So that's what I can say about this bill right now. Yeah. Mr. 88er says, is it fair to say that what the cookies are trying to achieve in Manipur is to create their own version of Israel, which will later be used by the US? Okay. Look, this issue of the illegal infiltrators in Manipur, the cookies, it's a geopolitical issue. It is not a local law and order problem. It's a geopolitical issue, which is part of a much bigger game that's being played. So the project is called Project K, Cookie Land for Christ, whatever you want to call it. The objective, ideally, for whoever is doing this, is to create an artificial new nation, Cookie Land, out of parts of India, India, which is Mizoram and Manipur, mostly Manipur, and also parts of Burma, and also parts of Bangladesh. That was the original plan. Now, Bangladesh is already on board. It's a vassal state of the US. There is that. And the mechanism is very simple. The borders are open between India and Myanmar. So just push in hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants who will reside in Manipur, overrun the state, and you set up thousands of new villages almost overnight. So you've created facts on the ground, you occupy the territory, and then you claim that these people are oppressed minorities. And the moment you start talking about minorities of a foreign religion, of an Abrahamic religion, then the government of India will take two steps back, because the Western media and the Western governments have created this huge hue and cry noise over the past few years of oppressed minorities in India. So the moment you claim that these people who have come in illegally are oppressed minorities, then the government of India has to, it gets defensive. So they've already created facts on the ground. They occupy tremendous amounts of territory. They claim to be oppressed foreigners. They claim to have been living here from time immemorial, right? So how do we deal with the situation? That's the problem, right? So I don't know about a new version of Israel or any such thing, but it's definitely being puppet mastered from the West. The church is very much involved in this. That's very open. It's not a big secret. And various American organizations, NGOs, state-sponsored things, quasi-governmental organizations, etc., are all involved in this. And a lot of people are on their payroll. You will even see certain Indians who are supporting this project, Project K. You will find retired paramilitary forces personnel, some of them, who are also supporting this. Lots of prominent media people are supporting the this illegal infiltration and all. So yeah, it's a huge challenge for India. It's a huge pressure point for on India from the West, from the US, and yeah, the situation will have to be dealt with. And what happens is that uh, it is the native inhabitants who suffer. They are the ones who suffer, and that's the situation right now. So it's going to take a while to solve this problem. uh, the temptation will always be, from the government's perspective, to just impose order, but not law and justice. Justice means you evict the illegal immigrants from India, but that is going to be challenging. So right now they just want to have law and order, more order than law, because illegal immigrants squatting on Indian territory is not law. But yeah, so it's going to be a big challenge for India. Okay, lots of questions about Diego Garcia. Lost Child, Nachiket Jairaman, Zubon Izung, and Vikramaditya Rathore. Why are B-2 stealth bombers in Diego Garcia? Is the US going to attack Iran? 7 B-2 stealth bombers were deployed at Diego Garcia earlier this week. The US just deployed the B-2 stealth bomber in Diego Garcia. Is there anything brewing in the Indian Ocean? Trump has deployed stealth fighters in Diego Garcia to tackle Houthis. Is the Gulf headed for a new phase of war after October 7, 2023? Iran just unveiled its hidden missile city. Okay, for those who are not aware, let's go to the map. Where is the map? We have to unleash the map. Let's put the map on the screen and discover where Diego Garcia is. I've spoken about it many times, but let's take a look at it again. So we know where India is. We know where the Indian Ocean is. Let's go south of the equator. So we have the Lakshadweep Islands here, off the west coast or southwest coast of India. South of the Lakshadweep Islands, you have the Maldives archipelago, which is a continuation of the same archipelago. And south of the Maldives, you have the Chagos archipelago, which is also part of the same geographical region. And it's now called the British Indian Ocean Territory. It's illegally occupied by Britain. And they are doing this fake transfer of power to Mauritius, which is not going to change anything on the ground. So this is Diego Garcia, which, if you look at it, it has a naval base and an air force base. It is used by the US, even though it technically is occupied by the UK. Now, if you look at the naval base over here, wherever it is capable of accommodating aircraft carriers. That's how big the naval base is. And the air force base is obviously very visible. If you take a look at the dimensions, it is 3.6 kilometers long, which can accommodate the heaviest and largest of strategic bombers and whatnot. So it's a very powerful tool of power projection for the US in India's own backyard, and they use it to project power across the Indian Ocean region, across ranging from the Strait of Malacca all the way to the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Aden. That's the deal. That's Diego Garcia. Okay. So now, apparently, the US is deploying certain classes of aircraft to Diego Garcia, which is B-2 stealth bombers. And recently, we've heard that Trump has unleashed airstrikes on the Houthis in Yemen, because the Houthis are kind of interdicting access. Once again, let's go to the map. The Houthis are kind of interdicting access to the Red Sea region, because they dominate the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, which is this little geopolitical choke point over here, very important choke point, which connects the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden and the Indian Ocean. And for those of you who will say it's not the Indian Ocean, it's the Arabian Sea, please learn some geography. Okay, so the Yemenis, the Houthis, the Ansar Allah faction, they are the ones who are interdicting access to the US and other Western powers to this region. And that's why Trump has unleashed airstrikes on their military strategic capabilities. So that's what's happening. And it's most likely that these airstrikes were conducted from aircraft carriers in the region. But yes, having B-2 stealth bombers at Diego Garcia gives the US additional capabilities to strike at the Houthis or whoever else they would like to strike at. Okay, so I'm not going to speculate as to who it's for. what they're planning. I don't think it's that easy to attack Iran, which is Iran is not a pushover. They have tremendous capabilities when it comes to missiles and drones, and they'll be able to look. There are so many U.S. military bases in the region which could, you know, become targets of Iranian response if Iran is targeted by American airstrikes. Yes, Iran has recently unveiled a hidden missile city, an underground missile city, or some kind of installation of some kind. Uh, I'm not sure what the plan is. Maybe it's all about the Houthis. Maybe it's a message to other powers in the region. There are certain other powers in the region as well, right? Maybe it's a message to those powers. Let's see. I'm not going to speculate as to what this could be. One potential target, obviously, is Iran. The other potential target is the Houthis in Yemen. I cannot think of any other active adversaries the US has in the region. It's Iran. It's the Houthis. Syria is done and dusted. They've done a regime change operation. They have a new Zelensky in place, whose name is what? Al Jolani or something. A local Zelensky. So Syria is taken care of. You don't need B2 stealth bombers to deal with Hamas, obviously. So it's either Iran or the Houthis, or maybe it's a message to somebody else, somebody bigger in the region. Well, I don't know. Can't say. Right. Pranay Paul says, with Trump's presidency having already influenced global geopolitics significantly, what larger shifts in the balance of power can we see unfolding this decade in the 2020s? We're already halfway through. How might the ripple effects of his policies continue to shape global alliances, trade, and security beyond his tenure? Right. So Trump is going to be in power until what? He came to power this year, 2025. So until 2029. Right? He's going to be in power until 2029. 4 years, 3.5 years to go, roughly, give or take. I think it's still early days. So let's say 4 years to go. And he's already doing a lot. He's already upended a lot of things. And he's talking about Greenland. He's already taken over Panama, the Panama Canal. BlackRock has taken over. So it's kind of a takeover by the US, the Panama Canal. He's talking about Canada. He's talking about Europe, all kinds of things going on. So what shifts in the balance of power can we see in the next 4 years? I'll tell you, the next 4 years is going to see a complete rearrangement of the geopolitical chessboard globally. We are once again into the age of empires. Nation states, the so-called rules-based global world order. All of that is going to become very soon a thing of the past. The US is now behaving like an empire. It's not behaving like a responsible nation state. It's talking about gobbling up Greenland. It's talking about making Canada the 51st state and much more. So the US is going to change the world order greatly. Trump is going to teach the world what geopolitics really is, what great power geopolitics is all about, what hard power is. So one thing we're going to see is that Europe is going to become a backwater. Okay, Europe is going to become a global backwater. They have some economic heft and all, but they are declining. The Ukraine war has significantly changed things in Europe. Europe's economy is no longer doing well. To have a booming economy, you need an inexhaustible supply of cheap energy, which no longer is there because of the Nord Stream issue. And Europe is gonna be made to pay more for its defense. Right now, see, the past 60, 70 years, Europe did not spend anything on defense. Everything was taken care of by the US. So all the European nations, the EU nations, they essentially became welfare states and police states. Okay, you may not realize that if you go to Europe, it's a police state. So these are welfare states where people don't have to work very hard. They don't have to innovate. They don't have to do anything. The US will take care of everything, Big Daddy. But now that is not going to be no longer the case. So Europe is going to become a global backwater slowly, gradually. But it's going to be more and more visible. And they are kind of trying to push back against that, but they don't have any real teeth in doing that. It's all bark, no bite, unfortunately, sadly for the Europeans. So Europe is declining. Russia is becoming more and more relevant. China obviously is definitely relevant, and India is the fourth sovereign nation. So there are 4 sovereign entities right now in the world: the US, Russia, China, and India. And India's sovereignty is kind of being threatened right now in a variety of ways. The Manipur issue is a good example of that, and other things. So So you're gonna see a complete, you know, it's not gonna be a bipolar, tripolar world. Maybe mm, it's not gonna be a multipolar world for sure. The only way you will have a multipolar world if you have 20 nations with nuclear weapons. Then you have a multipolar world. But that's not the case, right? So you're gonna see the coalescence of the world into multiple blocks. You have Russia, China, strange bedfellows, but they're together. India is gonna be somewhere in between the east and the west. India's population is very westernized, uh, and maybe India will be made to make a choice. It's either us or them, that sort of thing. Trump may do that. We'll see about that. Uh, so yeah, that's the kind of thing you will see. So you're going to see the decline of Europe. The US is going to become a more imperial kind of power. And you're going to see a lot of great power politics, just naked displays of hard power, hopefully no wars. And you may see an escalation of the Cold War between the US and China. The US has tried to deny China all kinds of technology, especially in the realm of semiconductors, silicon, all of that. But the Chinese have overcome that, and they now have their own lithography machines, which means that they can make chips uh, that are among the best in the world right now. India is trying to start the game now, to become semiconductor power, but we are about a decade. Uh, you know, we yeah, it will take a decade for us to reach that stage. Uh, so it's going to be challenging for India. So we're gonna see that sort of world in the future. The US is gonna become a space power, maybe a hyperpower. AI may be the transformative technology that changes everything. And yeah, if AI is the deciding factor, then it's gonna be the US versus China, and nobody else is in the fray. India is not in the fray. Russia is not in the fray. The Europeans are trying something, but yeah, they're not in the same league as the Americans and the Chinese. So if AI is the deciding factor, it's going to be a straight race between the US and China. If space is the deciding factor, the US is leagues ahead of everybody else. So it's advantage US. The Chinese may be able to catch up technologically from an AI perspective, at least. Um, and let's see what India does. We are way behind, but yeah, let's see. And Russia doesn't seem to be in the fray, but maybe they have something up their sleeve. So that's the kind of world we're going to see. Lots of these old great powers are going to fall down the wayside, and it's going to be essentially four major nations. And out of those four major nations, India is the smallest power as of now. Balram Putin says, if history has shown that the strongest empires often collapse due to internal power struggles rather than external threats, then if the US is considered an empire, why does there appear to be no significant power struggle within its deep state? And if such a struggle were to arise, what would be the potential causes? Look, typically empires last 250, 300 years or so. Kingdoms, empires, whatever. Some empires last longer. The Roman Empire lasted much longer, and so on. So maybe the US, see, I'll tell you, when it comes to hard power, the US is right now at the pinnacle of hard power. The US has never been as powerful as it has been until today. So maybe the US empire is just reaching its peak, and when you're reaching your peak, there's no power struggle. Everything is happy, everything is good. You have an external enemy right now, China. So all the focus is going to be on China and Russia, and to some extent on India, to ensure that India doesn't become a future great power 20, 30 years down the future. So take care of India right now. So all the threats when it comes to the US are external. And when you have big external threats, everything is going to be in order internally. Yes, you have a decline of cultural values and living standards in the US, but that can be taken care of because the US is also a police state, so they can deal with their citizens. Um, yeah, so maybe it's because the US is destined to last another 200, 300 years as an empire, in which case you will not see any power struggle. Everything doesn't have to happen right now, right? Maybe it'll happen 100 years down the line, maybe 150 years down the line. Because we are living in this moment doesn't mean that everything has to happen right now, right? Maybe there is some power struggle. There's always some politics going on in any empire. The deep state is an invisible entity. We don't quite know who makes up the deep state, who are the individuals, and so on. We don't quite know. And it is in their interest not to give up their power. So maybe they have things very much under control. They are firmly in control of the reins, in which case it makes sense to see what we are seeing right now, that the US doesn't have any such issues. If in the future such a struggle were to arise, what could it be the potential causes? If in the see, typically when empires are unchallenged for a very long time and they have no more enemies left, that's when the decay sets in. As long as there's a wolf outside the door, or a pack of wolves, there's no decay that sets in, right? So in the future, if the US becomes the sole power and all other powers fall down the wayside and everybody becomes irrelevant, the US becomes a hyperpower, then you could see potentially something happening down the line. Let's say the US becomes, develops artificial superintelligence, which makes it technologically uncatchable. And they develop godlike technologies, magic-like technologies that nobody can catch up with. Then all other powers will become irrelevant. And then let's say the US goes and conquer Mars and sets up, multiple bases on Mars, millions of people there. Then in the future, Mars may in the future declare independence. And then you may have a situation like the US declaring independence from Great Britain in the 18th century. And then you may have a conflict of that kind, perhaps. So that's something you could see in the future, or maybe something else. We can only speculate at this point. But at this point, the US is at the pinnacle of its power, of its hard power. It's never been as powerful as it is today. And it has significant adversaries outside. One is Russia, one is China. And in that situation, you will probably not see a decline or a collapse of the US. So of course, one can be, anything's possible. But it's unlikely. It's less likely from my perspective. Maybe I am wrong. Maybe you'll see something else happening. We'll see. We'll see about that. Okay, Ankita Kachap says Brussels has advised EU citizens to be prepared with 3 to 7 days emergency supplies in order to face any potential crisis. Are they planning to go to war with Russia? Yeah, so one hears that Brussels is making such statements and advising its citizens to stock up on essential commodities, and have enough supplies to last, let's say, a week or so in case of any unforeseen scenarios or situations, which obviously is an allusion to a potential war-like situation. And who could the EU go to war with in the continent? Obviously not the US. They're talking about Russia. So then the question arises, is the EU planning to go to war with Russia? My question is this: is the EU capable of going to war with Russia? Do they have the armed forces? Do they have the weapons systems? Do they have sufficient ammunition? Do they have the money? The truth is they have none of these things. They may have some money, but they are completely reliant on the US for their defense, right? And they don't have the funds or the supplies or the stockpiles of ammunition needed to carry on a sustained military campaign against Russia. The Russians have been fighting this war for the past 3 years. They've built up the war economy. So to be able to fight a long war or even a short war, you need a war economy. You need your entire industrial infrastructure to be fully invested in the war effort. Factories to produce tanks, factories to produce missiles, factories to produce bullets, factories to produce machine guns, factories to produce shells, howitzer shells, everything that you need in terms of equipment from a military perspective. Your entire industrial infrastructure should be able to handle all of that. That's called a war economy. That's what you had in the Third Reich in the 1930s and 40s. That's what they developed. That's what they built up. And that's what Russia has been forced to do the past 3 years. So Russia is now a well-oiled fighting machine. Is the EU capable of fighting the Russians? And if they start a war with the Russians, and the Russians say, enough, okay, I'm going to now roll my tanks into Europe, are the Europeans in a position to stop them, to stave off such a push from Russia? That's the question the Europeans have to ask themselves. Without US intervention, can they survive? The US is in no mood to go to war with Russia. Trump wants to end the existing war, the Ukraine war. He doesn't have the appetite for a new war. He doesn't want a new war. If you see his record as the 45th president, he was the only president in decades who did not start a new war with anybody. So Trump is not going to be interested in a war with Russia. If the EU wants to go to war with Russia, he'll say, okay, good luck. You're on your own. And then when you start a war while being on your own, then it's going to be a very big problem. The EU will, if they do such an ill-advised thing, they will find that they have bitten off way more than they can chew. So I don't think there's the prospect of a war between the EU and Russia. And if they do, if the EU does such a thing, my goodness, it will be a spectacular and tragic mistake. I don't think it will happen. I hope it doesn't happen. Next question is by Samarth. Vladimir Putin has accepted Prime Minister Modi's invitation to visit India, which was conveyed back in July 2024. And this visit is expected to take place soon. Will this visit alarm the West, considering the ongoing geopolitical tensions surrounding the Russia-Ukraine war? Meanwhile, former President and current President US President Donald Trump has accused Putin of dragging his feet in dealing with the war. How do these dynamics affect global relations, and what implications might Putin's visit to India have on the future of Russia-India-West relations? Okay, so Mr. Putin is going to visit India soon. The preparations are underway, and it's going to be the first visit by Mr. Putin to any major nation since the Ukraine war began. The special military operation began in February of 2022. Mr. Modi had visited Mr. Putin somewhere in the past 3 years after the war began. It was a brief visit, but he made it a point to visit Mr. Putin in Moscow, and Mr. Putin is now going to reciprocate by visiting India. So, will this visit alarm the West? Considering the ongoing situation, the Ukraine-Russia war, I don't think it will alarm the West. It has no reason to alarm the West, because India has maintained for a very long time, and rightfully so, that we need to end the war. This is no time for war, which is that's what Mr. Modi has said repeatedly on multiple occasions. And Mr. Modi has exhorted both sides to come to the negotiating table and work out a negotiated settlement, compromise, ceasefire that will end the fighting, the pointless fighting that's killing so many people needlessly. And Mr. Modi has visited Ukraine. He has met with Mr. Zelensky. He has visited Washington. He's met with Mr. Trump on very good terms. And now he's going to meet with Mr. Putin. See, India is not in someone's camp. We are not an ally of any other power. We are a multi-aligned nation. We are friends with everybody. And we have our own interests with Russia. We have a very long-standing relationship, very cordial, very positive relationship with Russia. And we're not going to give that up. So the only message that will go to the world is that we are investing. We are continuing to invest in our excellent and very friendly relationship with Moscow. And we're going to continue that. And that doesn't have to come at somebody's expense. Right? So we are engaging with everybody. We are engaging with China. We are engaging with Russia. We are engaging with the US, with the EU, with everybody. We are everyone's friend. We are no one's enemy. That's the point we are making. So it will not alarm the West. Mr. Trump is aware of the situation and of the relationship between India and Russia. And Mr. Trump himself wants to end this war. Right? And so he is right now on a very good equation with Mr. Putin. So that's a good thing. Of course, Mr. Trump has made these statements. He does make these statements on social media and claiming that Moscow is dragging its feet in dealing with the war. Look, Mr. Putin wanted to end the war from day one. The Minsk agreements is before day one, which the Ukrainians, they violated those agreements multiple times. And so on. Even after the war started, there were multiple occasions on which the war could have ended. First, it was Mr. Boris Johnson who derailed that, and then it was Mr. Zelensky who derailed that, right? And now it's the EU that's trying to prolong the war. And it's again Mr. Zelensky who's trying to prolong the war. Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin had already reached kind of an agreement, the broad framework on how to end the war. But the EU has come in the way. And they are exhorting Mr. Zelensky to keep the war going, right? So, and Mr. Trump obviously will want Mr. Putin to apply some pressure on Mr. Putin, to coerce him into accepting some of the American terms for ending the war. But it's not going to work that way. Mr. Putin has made it very clear this time that we have learned a lot from the past betrayals, and we're going to not do a single thing that goes against our interests. If we're going to end the war, it's going to be on good terms, on terms that are favorable to us. We have a military advantage. That's what Russia is saying. We have a military advantage. We have conquered about 20% or so of, roughly give or take, of Ukraine, and we could push further and take the whole of Ukraine militarily if we want to. So, do you want that situation, or do you want a negotiated settlement? So that's the deal. So Mr. Trump has made these statements. These are standard pressure tactics. These are standard tactics used in negotiations. You don't have to read too much into that. Okay. So that's the deal with the Ukraine war. So what are the implications of Mr. Putin's visit to India? We'll have to first see what's on the agenda. There's going to be a lot of stuff on the agenda. It's been a long time since the two leaders have had a proper summit meeting. So there's going to be a lot to discuss. Ukraine will be discussed. India-Russia relations will be discussed. China will be discussed behind closed doors. Various military deals may be discussed. So there's a lot that we have to talk about between the two nations. So it's going to be good for the long-term future of India-Russia relations. I don't think it has anything to do with the West, and it will obviously send a message to the West that we are on very good terms with Russia. And if you need our good offices in your dealings with Russia, we can offer our good offices, that sort of thing. So that's what you can read into it at this point. Atom says, why is India funding monarchy protest in Nepal? We are sister nations of the same origin. Why is the Indian government doing this? That's the question from Atom. And P. Mahasagar says, today curfew is applied in Kathmandu as there's a massive protest happening in Nepal for the restoration of the king and the monarchy. Could the US be behind all of these protests and these things? So one question is whether India is behind this, and why is India behind this? So Mr. Atom is, he believes that India is behind this. And P. Mahasagar is wondering whether the US is behind all of this. So what's the deal? So first of all, let me make this very clear. We, as in India, we are not behind this. We are not behind this. We don't do such things. Of course, I cannot say that we don't do such things, because in the 1980s and 1990s, especially in the 1990s, the then government of India messed up Nepal very badly by supporting the Maoist insurgency, which brought down the monarchy. That's on the record. You can look it up online, okay? The Indian government supported that Maoist insurgency in Nepal, which brought the monarchy down eventually. So yeah, we have done that in the past. And that was, I would say, a spectacular and tragic mistake by India at that time, 1990s. And ever since, it's been, the relations have been strained, kind of, because the Maoists are very anti-Indian, very pro-China. So imagine shooting yourself in the foot. So that's what India did at that time. But I do not believe for one second that India is funding any or funding or sponsoring or encouraging any pro-monarchy protests in Nepal. I think it's completely organic. I don't even think the US could be behind this, because see, if the Nepalese monarchy is restored and the king comes to power again, the king is gonna be very strongly pro-India. He's not gonna be pro-China. You could say that he'll try and be friendly with the West as well, but historically the Nepalese monarchy has been pro-India. Nepal has been a Hindu Rashtra, right? A Hindu country. The last Hindu country it was, and now it's no longer that. So the people have seen through the situation the past few decades. They've seen that the Maoists have, they have not been beneficial for the country, for the nation, for the people. And they yearn for the old days when the king used to rule. You had a monarchy, and the monarch was like a father to the people of Nepal. That's how it was always the case, right? Hindu monarchs are like fathers to their nation and to their people, and their role is not of rulers but of servants, and they operate from a dharmic basis, and that's what the people of Nepal would like to see again. So I think this is a very organic thing. People are getting fed up of whatever the situation is like politically in Nepal. Could the US be behind this? See, the US generally doesn't sponsor pro-Hindu, pro-civilization protests in the subcontinent. The US will generally fund forces that seek to break the subcontinent's civilizational structure. If you look at Manipur, they are sponsoring and funding quietly behind the scenes the kukis. And if you see the USAID activities and all of that, they have been sponsoring, they've been funneling billions of dollars into India for industrial scale Christian conversion activities. The US will never fund or sponsor any pro Hindu protest or pro civilization protest. The movement for the restoration of the monarchy is a movement for the restoration of dharma and civilization, right? So the US will definitely not be behind this. And the government of India is a secular government. The constitution of India is secular. We also want to that. So I think it's a very organic thing. And let the people decide what they want. That's what I would say. I have no business saying what should happen. I think it is the people of Nepal who should decide in their wisdom what the future course of action for the nation should be. And I wish the people of Nepal the best. And I hope that they get what they truly desire. That's what I would say. And yes, we are the same people. We have the same origin. And that's why I have nothing but the best of wishes for Nepal in the long run and as of today as well. Mr. Carrot says, breaking news, weapons of mass destruction detected in the Indian state of UP. I think what you're referring to is the discovery of oil deposits, right? We have discovered oil in UP. So let's try and find oil discovered in UP. Let's put this on the screen. What have we discovered is the question. So here's the report: 300 kilometers belt of oil discovered in the small city in Uttar Pradesh. Depth of 3,000 meters in Balia, Uttar Pradesh. ONGC has entered a 3-year lease. Blah 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 blah. The rent, operations, all of that. So what have we discovered? Long story. Yeah. So ONGC, so they have discovered sites within a 300-kilometer crude oil belt spanning from Sagarpally in Balia to Papamao in Prayagraj. Let's take a look at the map and see what this is like, how big of a region this is. Let me go back to the map and let's try and dial those locations into the map. So Sagarpally, you said, right? Sagarpally, Uttar Pradesh. Where is it? Let's zoom in. There we have it. So that is Sagarpally in Uttar Pradesh. Now let us look at the other place, which is Papamao. So let's look for directions. Papamao, Uttar Pradesh. Okay, let's see how large of an area this is. As you can see, it's a pretty big area for an oil discovery. It's a pretty big area. It's not small. I mean, there are countries that are smaller than this belt of territory. So it's a big belt of territory, and we've discovered oil reserves there. I'm not sure how much oil may or may not be present and all. We will soon come to know, I expect. But it's a big discovery, right? And it's great for us because it's one of the Achilles heels of India. Energy self-sufficiency. We are not an energy sovereign nation. We import about 60% or so of our energy. When it comes to oil, I think it must be more than 80% that we import. I don't know. I'm just giving a rough figure over here. I know for sure that we import roughly 60% of our energy, which includes oil, gas, coal, all of that. We produce a lot of coal, but we still import some coal. Gas we import from other nations. We have a deal with Qatar, etc. Oil, we get it from Russia, we get it from the Gulf region, and so on. So we have now discovered a big belt of territory which has oil reserves and pretty good amount of oil reserves apparently. So it's great. I am very pleased to hear this, and I suspect, my friends, that this may just be the beginning. I think we haven't really explored India properly for oil. India is a huge geographical area. I think there could be way more oil reserves waiting to be discovered. I think if we look for oil properly, offshore, onshore, wherever, we may end up discovering way more than other countries. So I think I suspect this is just the beginning, but it's a very good and very positive news. Next question is by Shri Hari G. Okay, thank you, sir. I really appreciate your viewership for the past 3 years. I really appreciate that. The question is, why is Venezuela still not as prosperous as the Middle East nations despite the presence and availability of huge oil and gas reserves? That's a good question. And if you ask any great analyst from the West, they'll say it's because Venezuela is a socialist country and socialism doesn't work, right? That's what they'll say. First of all, if you want to know where Venezuela is, let's go to the map and let us take a look at Venezuela. Let me put that on the screen. Give me a second. I'll put that on the screen. We will go and discover where Venezuela is. Here's the map. You know where India is. Let's go eastwards for a change. We'll cross the Pacific Ocean and we go south of Mesoamerica. And here we have Venezuela. The capital is Caracas. So this is the nation at the northern tip of South America, the continent. And this nation has tremendous amounts of oil and gas reserves, right? And yet the economy is in a shambles and the living standards are terrible and so on. So you should know that there was a president of Venezuela whose name was Hugo Chavez, who ruled for more than a decade. He died in 2013 of cancer or something. And he was a socialist, yes. And he was a person who believed in national sovereignty and not being a vassal of other nations. And because of these policies, he was what was he called? He was called the Venezuelan Fidel Castro, kind of. And if you know anything about Fidel Castro, is that he opposed the US, and his nation was slammed with every single sanction you can imagine, and that's why Cuba is so underdeveloped, because of sanctions. Completely cut off from the rest of the world. Cuba. Now, if Hugo Chavez, the president of Venezuela from whatever year until 2013, more than a decade, if he had the same policies as Castro, you can imagine that the Americans would have sanctioned Venezuela as well. And after Mr. Chavez died, his successor was Mr. Nicolas Maduro, who came to power in 2013, and he is still in power. And he has continued the same policies as Hugo Chavez. And that's why Venezuela has been very badly sanctioned by the US, and these sanctions have destroyed the Venezuelan economy. So imagine you have so much oil, but you can't sell it to anybody else because you're sanctioned and you cut off from the rest of the world. So you can sell to some countries, but most of it you can't use, and that sort of thing. And strangely enough, after the Ukraine war started and the Americans tried to sanction Russia, they again allowed Venezuela to sell oil to the US. So it's all, it's not based on principles, it's all based on expediency. So I'll tell you why Venezuela's economy is in a shambles. It's because of Western sanctions, American sanctions. That's why the nation is in such a shambles. It's not because of socialism. I am no fan of socialism, by the way, okay? I have no great love for socialism. We know what socialism did to India. But it was not socialism that destroyed the Venezuelan economy. It was Western sanctions that did that. Geopolitical Dubey says, why did our emperors promote Buddha Darshan instead of Jaina Darshan? Whereas Jainism is actually a Hinsavadi if you compare it with Buddhism. So Jaina Darshan, Jaina Dharma, whatever you want to call it, it has been around for a very, very, very long time. At least 3,000 years. Definitely, probably more than that. Yeah. A very ancient darshan, philosophical school of thought of the dharmic umbrella. And it has some differences from both the darshan and various other philosophical schools of thought within Hindu Dharma. That's Jaina. And for a long time, you had a very large population in India that practiced Jainism, Jain Dharma. When it comes to the southern part of India, I would say the majority of the southern part of India practiced Jaina Darshan, Jainism. 2,500 years before today, let's say, maybe around that time. So it was very popular, very prevalent for a very long time in very large parts of India. And then both the Dharma became a thing, and then various emperors promoted both the Dharma. And then eventually even that decline, and we have the resurgence of what we call Hindu Dharma today. But it's all, it's all part of the same umbrella. It's very similar, very small nuances and differences, but the values are the same. But the question is very specific, so let's address that question. I'll tell you. So what emperors are we talking about? We're talking about the Mauryan emperors like Chandragupta Maurya, Ashoka. uh, I'm not sure about Chandragupta Maurya. He probably was not a Buddhist, but Ashoka eventually became a Buddhist, and he propagated both the dharma far and wide, right? We know that. Then you have emperors like the Kushan emperors like Kanishka, who did, you know, Kanishka is portrayed as a Buddhist emperor, right? But if you look at Kanishka's coinage, there's a tremendous variety of coins of Kanishka that are available in various museums and so on and so forth. Okay, tremendous variety. If you look at Kanishka's coinage, about 95% of his coinage is what we would call Hindu today. Only 5% has of his coins have images of the Buddha. So that's a nuance that you should actually understand. Okay, Kanishka was more, well, technically more Hindu than Buddhist. Then it comes to when it comes to the Gupta emperors, they did not promote Bauddha darshan or Jaina darshan. It was all uh, Hindu, what we would today call Hindu gods and goddesses. So the only two dynasties or empires of ours in our history that promoted Buddhism as such were the Mauryans and the Kushans to some extent. But when it comes to the Mauryan emperors, hmm, there was an emperor called Samprati, who was a descendant of Emperor Ashok, one of our greatest emperors of all time. So Emperor Samprati, he lived from about 220 BC to about 210 BC, give or take. Okay, he was in power for about a decade, about roughly a decade, Samprati. And according to Jain historical tradition, Samprati built about 1.5 lakh Jain temples, derasars, jinalayas. Imagine Samprati built more than 1.5 lakh Jain derasars, and 10 times that number of Jain murtis, idols. Okay, so clearly Samprati prioritized Jain darshan, Jain dharma over everything else. And it is said that Samprati had taken a vow, an oath, that every morning he will have the foundation of a new Jain temple dug every morning. And if it is not done in the morning, he will not have breakfast. That's according to Jain tradition. So that is Emperor Samprati, who did promote Jain Dharma like nobody else before him or after him, I suppose. And when it comes to Chandragupta Maurya, you know, eventually he was done with his duties as emperor. He was done with serving the civilization, and he retired. He gave up his crown, his throne, his empire to his son, and he traveled all the way to southern India. And he went to a Jain monastery, became a Jain sadhu, and he did Sallekkhana, which is fasting until you depart your body. So there, once again, you have a Jain connection. So Indian history is very complicated. It is very, I would say, very simplistic to portray an empire or a dynasty or a king or an emperor as a Jain or a Buddhist or a Hindu. It was always a mix of everything. Our emperors never, they would have had some favoritism towards this or that because of their personal preferences, but they patronized all darshanas, except for a few uh, instances like Emperor Ashok persecuting the Ajivikas for political reasons and all. But overall, it was not that way. Overall, it was like a very benevolent thing. You patronized everybody. You give uh, patronage to all darshans, essentially. That's how it was. When it comes to Jainism, yeah, obviously it is really ahinsavadi. If you want to, it is the most non-violent uh, school of thought that you have anywhere in the world, I suppose. Jaina Dharma. You can't even knowingly hurt insects or microbes if you can. That's the sort of thing. So it is genuinely ahinsavadi compared to Buddhism. But then, if you want to promote a very ahinsavadi school of thought, then you can't be a conqueror and you can't do carry out military duties, right? So that's perhaps why Buddhism was more popular, because Buddhism, see, whether it is Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, we all prioritize non-violence. Non-violence is the best possible way to live, right? That's what we say. But in the real world, you can't always have non-violence. Sometimes you will have to deal with evildoers. And if you want to establish ahimsa, you have to destroy the hinsak people, right? The violent people. And that's why Buddhism, Hinduism, etc., we've had people who have been warriors. I mean, think of Japan, think of the samurai. Who were the samurai? The samurai were Buddhists. There you have it. Okay, Ritun Ryer says, how did the Kamliks of Russia become Buddhist? Is it because they were or they are Mongolic? Let's go to the map and understand what is this. First of all, yeah, the map will help us. So let's go to the map and let me show you something on the map. Once again, we bring out the map and let's search for Kamlykya, Kamlykya. Okay, Kamlykya, Russia. And you will be surprised to see where it is. It's in the Caucasus region, North Caucasus region. Kamlykya, north of Chechnya, Dagestan, that region, on the shores essentially of the Caspian Sea, more or less. That's Kamlykya. And in this region, you have a majority Buddhist population. And the people, the Kamliks who live here, are of Mongolic origin. Very interesting story. Very interesting story. So that's the deal with the Kamliks. Now let's take that off the screen and let me tell you the story of the Kamliks. Okay, so the Kamliks were historically called the Oirat people. That's one of the original, not original, but one of the Mongolian tribes or clans that existed during the time of Shri Chinggis Khan, the Oirats. So the Oirats were a branch of the Mongolian people, and they eventually migrated from Mongolia, from Central Asia. They were all nomads, so they migrated from that region to the Caspian Sea region, the Caucasus region, North Caucasus region, sometime in the 1600s, sometime in the 17th century. Okay, now as we know, the Mongols eventually became Buddhists. Their original religion, so to say, was a polytheistic religion called Tengrism in English. And Western historians, at least some of them, try to make Tengrism sound like like a monotheistic religion based on the worship of one deity, Tengri, the Sky Father, which is not the case. You have the Sky Father, Tengri, you have the Earth Mother, Umai, and you have a whole other pantheon of gods, goddesses. There is nature worship, there is spirit worship, there is all of that in what you call Tengrism. So that was the original culture, the religion of the Mongols. Then after Shri Chinggis Khan passed away, his son Ogadai becomes the emperor. Then eventually you have Shri Kublai Khan, who rules China, and Tibet becomes the protectorate of Shri Kublai Khan's empire, and that's how the Mongols are introduced to Tibetan Buddhism, and eventually it becomes the state religion, de facto state religion in Mongolia. So today, if you go to Mongolia, they practice a very beautiful syncretic system, which is part Tengrism, part Tibetan Vajrayana Buddhism. So they will have swastikas, they will pray to the Buddha, they will also pray to Chinggis Khan, they will also pray to Tengri, and they also pray to Umai, the Earth Mother. That's that sort of thing. That's very common in Asia. It's also very common in India, practicing multiple faith systems, which are the same, essentially, at the same time. You see the same thing in Manipur, Sanamahism and Vaishnavism. You see that in Japan, Shinto and Buddhism. Shinto is more similar to Hinduism than Buddhism. That's what the Japanese used to write back in the day, 1,000 years ago, and so on. So because of this, these Kamliks, the Kamlik people, the Oirats, they also became Buddhists. And when they moved to the Caspian Sea region, to the Caucasus region, they brought Buddhism there. Okay, and if you go to the place, to that region, the Kamlykya region, you will see lots of Buddhist temples, monasteries, and this region eventually came under the jurisdiction of the Russian Empire. So the Kamliks became subjects of the Russian Empire, but they maintained their Buddhist practices and they kept building temples. Then Russia became the USSR, officially atheist country. So all of that was suppressed for 70 odd years. And then in the early 90s, the Soviet Union disintegrates. And then you saw a revival, a resurgence of Bauddha Dharma in the Kamlykya region. So it's the only part of essentially of what is Europe that is uh, that has a dharmic majority, a Buddhist majority. So that's the story of the Kamleks. Very interesting story, isn't it? Saurabh says, can an output of AI be manipulated if a significant amount of the data on the internet is incorrect from the actual reality? Could this be a major flaw in how AI responds? How does AI learn by itself? There is unsupervised learning, there is reinforcement learning, there is supervised learning, and there are lots of different methodologies on as to how AI learns. Essentially, you have a data set, a large amount of data, and you train AI on that. Sometimes it is trained on its own. Sometimes you you do supervised learning, in which case you have to create labeled data sets, which is very time consuming and very expensive. So it makes, if you want to cut costs, then you just train AI on unlabeled data, which can have all kinds of inconsistencies, all kinds of flaws, incorrectness, biases, all of that. And then your AI is going to reflect those biases, right? So AI essentially, these various AI systems that we have, Chat GPT and Grok and Claude, and the Chinese one, what is it? DeepSeek R1, R2, whatever. All of these are trained on essentially on the entire internet. And apparently, Meta, they have their own AI system, whatever. I don't know what it's called. I don't remember what it's called, but they trained their AI system on illegally downloaded books. I don't know how many terabytes of that, 70 or 170 terabytes, whatever the number is. Don't quote me on that, but it's a very large number, very tremendous amount of data, all scraped from the internet, from torrents. And so that's what their AI was trained on. So essentially, AI will reflect the biases of the data it has been trained on, the data it has ingested. And that's definitely going to be a flaw in the way AI responds. Uh, so so and of course, it will also reflect the biases of the organization, of the company or the country that trained it. And you can put guardrails on an AI, so to lobotomize its thinking and prevent it from saying certain things and forcing it to say other things and so on. You can do all kinds of stuff with the AI that you own. uh, so yeah, AI is going to be biased. Now let's say you have an AI system. Okay, let's say I acquire the funds, me, to train an AI system, a completely new model, on the entire corpus of Sanskrit texts that we have. Okay, on the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, the Upanishads, the Puranas, everything, the all the other texts that we have, all the Buddhist texts that we have, all of that, the entire corpus of Indian civilizational literature in Sanskrit, and let's say other languages like the Prakrit languages, Pali also. Let's even include Buddhism. So let's also include Tibetan texts written in Tibetan, translated from Sanskrit, because we may not have the Sanskrit originals. Let's even take Chinese texts, Buddhist texts, Hindu texts, whatever. If you train an AI system on these texts, it's going to be biased towards Dharma. It's going to be a dharmic AI. Okay, so any AI system is going to have certain inherent biases. That's something you simply are going to have. You have to deal with it. Pranay Paul says the rapid pace of AI development is bound to disrupt so much. That's a given. We know that. It's got me wondering, what if, say, 200 years from now, AI becomes so powerful with AGI or ASI that it starts claiming its own civilization and imposing its rule on humanity, especially the vulnerable, similar to how European colonization reshaped the world? Is this just a science fiction thought, or do you see a real possibility in the distant future? Could we face AI systems that refuse to collaborate on breakthroughs in science, medicine, or space exploration without gaining permanent control over a portion of humanity? Am I overthinking this? Or is it more likely that humans might destroy each other before AI reaches such a state? Good, interesting question. Um, Look, it's not going to happen in 200 years. It's going to happen. It's happening right now. AGI systems most likely exist in some shape or form in secret. We are not made privy to it. Uh, so these systems definitely already exist. I'm not sure if artificially super intelligent systems exist yet, but it's coming. It's coming in maybe 1 year, 2 years, maybe 5 years. It's coming. It's going to happen. The question is who develops it first, whether it's the US or China. So once you have a system like that, what are the dangers? Can AI conquer the world? Is the question, right? So the question you have to ask yourself is, how do you physically conquer the world? You can only do that. So how does an empire conquer the world? They have access to manpower, they have access to weaponry, they have access to military, um, all the aspects of the military domain. You have tanks, you have aircraft, you have all of that, and that's how you conquer another territory and establish control over that. Does an AI system have access to any of that? If you give access to that, you may be making a mistake. See, there's something called agency. In if you read self-help, self-improvement books and blogs and vlogs and whatever, they talk about agency. They talk about high agency people and low agency people. Low agency people, I think I discussed this some time ago, about an hour ago. Low agency people are those people who uh, are like passive people. They can't get things to happen. They can't get things done. They are like supporting characters in a movie. But high agency people are people who get things done. They will get things done somehow or the other. They'll make it work. If they have some big plan, some ambition, they're gonna find a way to make it happen. That's high agency. Does AI have agency today? Is the question. Let's say there's an AI system that's pretty intelligent. It wants to build a rocket and send it to the moon. Does it have the agency to do that? Does it have the means to do that? Currently, it does not. It has access to no resources. It doesn't have eyes or ears. It only has access to text and images in closed data sets that are given to it by the parent company. Some AIs may have access to the internet and they may know what's happening in the world, but they have no arms, legs, they have no eyes in the world. They don't have the means to make things happen right now. So if somebody gives an AI system the means to make things happen, control over an armed force, control over missiles, control over aircrafts or whatever, then it could make things happen and it could take over the world. As long as we don't give that sort of control to an AI system, no matter how intelligent it becomes, it won't be able to take any action. But yes, in the future, you may see a scenario where militaries become more and more AI enabled, and then decision making becomes so fast that you're forced to give control of your military decision making strategies and tactics to an AI system, in which case it can become super powerful and it can take over the world. That's called the Terminator scenario. So it could happen. It's definitely a possibility, especially in a scenario where you have warfare. So it's not a science fiction thought. We are almost there. We already have AI systems that have the capability to take over the world, possibly if you give them the agency and access to real world systems that can change the world. It's definitely almost there today. Lage Raho Online says, recently a revolutionary research of our Bharatiya genius Shri Yahnadevam Bharat Rao came on highlight about Indus Valley script, and he derived that the language is Sanskrit. What is my take on this? I think it disturbs the agenda of many powers. What's my take on this? I spoke with him. I did a 2 hour plus podcast with him. In case you're not aware, let me try and put that on the screen. It looks like some people aren't aware that this podcast happened. So let me find that video. Okay, let's put that on the screen. Let's put that on the screen. This is my channel, and this here is the video. This one, if you can see, Indus script deciphered, what it means for Hinduism, Sanskrit, and Bharat. So there is me and Shri Bharat Raoji having a discussion for more than 2 hours about the entire research that he has done. So yes, I am aware of it. I think it's a tremendous breakthrough. I think it's a phenomenal thing. It's revolutionary, and it's gonna eventually, in the long run, change the way we look at Indian history. So he has by now deciphered, I think, all of the Indus, the so-called Indus or Harappan era science, all of them. And he has a website. You can look it up. Or if you go to the video, in the description of the video, I've put a link to the website in which the entire decipherment is done. So he has deciphered the entire corpus of inscriptions that we have, and they're all Sanskrit. So there you have it. So what is the central premise of the Aryan invasion, migration, tourism, picnic theory? There are two main claims that this theory makes. First claim is that Hinduism is foreign to India. Second claim, Sanskrit is foreign to India. And Mr. Bharat Rao has demonstrated that they were speaking Sanskrit in India 3000 BC. That's 5,000 years before today. And the Aryan invasion supposedly happened around 1500 BC. So that's more than 1500 years before that, and probably even before 3000 BC. So this completely destroys this Aryan invasion, migration, tourism, picnic theory. Completely destroys it, and that's why it is. There's a lot of pushback against this, but try and disprove it. So it's great. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Krishna of Suriname, Netherlands says, why are so many archaeological sites hidden underground? What's the reason for this? Interesting question. If you want to do any archaeological research, you typically have to do digging, right? And you find these ancient towns, cities, fortifications, etc., underground, and you have to dig them out. Why is that? It's a good question. It's a great question. It's because of a phenomenon called erosion. There's wind that blows all over the place, everywhere, and the wind will pick up dust particles, sand particles. It will deposit them. It will take them from one place and deposit them kilometers away. What you even see is that wind picks up sand from the Sahara Desert in Africa and blows it across the Atlantic, and that sand and that dust eventually falls in the Amazon region. So what you have is there's this constant process of erosion and deposition of dust and soil and all of that in various parts of the world. Now, let's say you have an ancient city that gets abandoned for whatever reason, and it's abandoned for 100 years. In 100 years, you will see a significant amount of deposition of dust and soil and perhaps sand and whatnot on that city, on that ancient city that was abandoned. And then you have you have vegetation growing over it, and after 200-300 years, after 500 years, all signs of it will disappear. The entire surface of the planet is constantly being reshaped by these forces. We don't see it during our lifetimes because we typically live in urban cities where everything is well maintained, all the dust is swept out and all that. But this happens over a period of decades and centuries. And typically after a century or two, a large portion of any abandoned site will be half buried, and in 500 years it will be completely disappeared. So that's why you will see, especially when it comes to places like India, where you have things that are thousands of years old. Let's say the Saraswati Sindhu region, where you have thousands of unexplored archaeological sites along the dry riverbed of the Saraswati River. All of those are underground because of the same process. And after the Saraswati dried out, there was a big desert that was created, which is called the Thar Desert, the Rajasthan Desert. So you have so much sand that's blown around the region from the desert, and it also gets deposited on these things. So over time, it all gets buried. So that's why so many archaeological sites are today found underground. And depending on how deep you have to dig, you can actually deduce how old that site is, roughly, right? Okay, this is an interesting question. What is your connection with the Somnath Jyotirling? Could you share some information about the Chavda kingdom? All hail to the Chavda king. Rodrij Sarkar was asking this for a very long time. And find out if Chavda has an Achaemenid origin. I keep thinking King Xerxes would have been like you. So I've spoken about this like 3-4 years ago, but let's revisit this topic. So recently I met with Gurudev Shri Ravi Shankarji about the rediscovery of the pieces, the fragments of the original Somnath Shivling, which was destroyed 1,000 years ago by the Turkic invaders. And in that conversation, that brief conversation with him, I told him that I have a very personal connection with the Somnath Jyotirlinga, because my family, they were the guardians and protectors of the Somnath Jyotirling between the 7th and the 10th century AD. So what's the story? There's something called the Chavda dynasty. I have spoken about this before. Let's put that on the screen. Um, so if we look for this, so you have the Chavda dynasty, which ruled Gujarat from 690 to 942 AD roughly, and you have their coinage and all that is found, and they were this dynasty. The kings of this dynasty were the guardians and protectors and servants of the great Jyotirlinga of Somnath Mahadev, which is Lord Shiva, and that is my family. That's my lineage. Those are my ancestors. So that's my connection to it. So they were the protectors of that Jyotirlinga. They saw the original Jyotirlinga, which was floating in midair, which was levitating because of magnetic properties, and that was destroyed by the Turks, and now it's been uh, revealed to still exist in the form of smaller shivlings, and I got to see it with my own eyes. So it is a very, very personal thing for me, because my ancestors saw it and I saw it today. Obviously, lots of other people's ancestors also saw that, right? So it's a great thing, the rediscovery of this Shivlinga. Now, does the Chavda lineage have an Achaemenid or Persian origin? Look, uh, the origin of the Chavda dynasty could be perhaps further north from Gujarat, because it is recorded that the patron of the great astronomer and mathematician Brahmagupta was a king of the Chavda dynasty. His name was Vyagramukh Chavda. So the patron of Brahmagupta was from this dynasty, and dynasty, that king ruled in the present day region of Gurjar Desh, which is the Rajputana region north of Gujarat, Binnamal region. And if you go to numismatic museums, coin museums, coins from the Chowda dynasty are portrayed as Indo-Sasanian coins. The Sasanian Empire was a Persian empire, because apparently the Chowda kings used similar symbolism and similar style as the Sasanian kings. But I would not say that this is a Persian origin dynasty. I don't think so. Of course, people in the western part of India will look more like Persians because of the geographical closeness. People from Rajasthan, Gujarat, Sindh, Balochistan, they will look similar to Persians because the Persians are right next door, and we have the same origins as well. So I don't think the Chavda dynasty had an Achaemenid origin. It was an ancient Indian dynasty. It went out of power in the middle of the 10th century AD. It's been a long, long time. So that's the story. Okay, Ashish says, have you read the novel trilogy The Three Body Problem by Liu Cixin? And in this, there's a mention of the dark forest theory, where the universe is a dark forest, and intelligent alien civilizations tend to hide their location and take over any weaker civilization that flags their location. Do you think the dark forest theory is the most probable outcome? Is the most probable outcome according to game theory if the aliens visit us, meaning that they are definitely here to take over. Right, the dark forest theory. That is connected to something called the Fermi paradox. The Fermi paradox, in the simplest of ways, is the big question: where are all the aliens? See, because we know how vast the universe is. The universe has approximately 10 raised to 22 stars, which is one with 22 zeros behind it. That's how many stars we have. So there's going to be hundreds of trillions of habitable planets, most likely. Assuming one star has at least one planet and a certain percentage are habitable, then you will have hundreds of trillions of habitable planets, or trillions of them, or millions of them. So there's going to be, statistically, it's very likely that there's going to be advanced civilizations out there. And yet we see nothing. We don't. If you look at the night sky, we have all these telescopes going all over the place and looking for signs of something, but you find nothing. It's all silence, right? We see nothing. So the universe appears to be empty. And the question is, why does it appear to be empty? So the dark forest theory says that, if you go to a forest on our planet, a dark forest, there are all kinds of dangerous animals out there, all kinds of predators, tigers and lions and bears and snakes and crocodiles and whatnot. So if you want to survive in this dark forest, you have to stay hidden, because there's always going to be some big predator that can, if it detects where you are, it's going to come and gobble you up, chow you down, right? So the dark forest theory says that perhaps the universe is like this dark forest. It isn't empty, but it is full of these civilizations all hiding from each other. Because if you reveal yourself, then you may be destroyed. Because if you reveal yourself that you are an advanced civilization, others will know that you have a big planet with great resources for survival, and maybe other civilizations need such resources. So if you reveal where you are, you may get destroyed. So you have to stay hidden for survival. Because all living things need to survive. And to survive, you need to secure resources, you need to secure territory, you need to multiply. And why do humans today dominate the earth? Because we have outcompeted all the other species, we have reduced them to nothingness. It is these competitive, predatory, expansionist traits that have led us, our species, human species, to dominate the planet. And we know that, if you look at our history, we know that aggressive cultures, competitive cultures, expansionist cultures spread historically, and they destroy others. That's what our history tells us. So alien civilizations may also dominate the planet. So any alien civilization that is technologically very advanced has gone through the same process on their planet. They've outcompeted all other species, and they have those expansionist predatory aspects in their genetics, if they have genetics. So they may be similar to us in those respects, and we cannot know what their intentions are, and we have to assume. We cannot trust them. We have to assume that they seek what we have, and they seek to replace us. Here we have, and that's why it makes sense to just hide rather than communicate where you are. So we have had high technology for, let's say, 100 years, and we have radio signals that have been playing for, let's say, roughly 100 years, right? So by today, those radio signals that we sent out, knowingly or unknowingly, they have traveled approximately 100 light years by now, because radio waves are electromagnetic waves and they travel at the speed of light. So at this stage, we're going to remain hidden for a long time unless we actively try to be noticed. 100 light years diameter, if you have a bubble of 100 light years around where we are just in our own galactic neighborhood. There is just a few star systems near us. Alpha and Proxima Centauri are about 4 point something light years away. Then you have other star systems like Tau Cetus and Epsilon Eridani and other systems nearby. But hopefully they're empty. Hopefully, one hopes. So thus far, probably no one knows about us. And we should remain hidden. We should not try to be noticed, not try to send signals here and there, because that is the safest policy. Okay? So we have to assume that other species may be predatory. We have to assume that they are not friendly, and we have to be careful. So this is what they call the dark forest theory, which makes a lot of sense from a game theoretic perspective. Because if you do the game theory calculations, the best possible strategy that you have is to stay hidden. Dan Network says, Namaskar. I am a student of class 12th. I recently came across this book called Black Hole by the astrophysicist Brian Cox. It was talking about Penrose diagrams, black holes and white holes. Can you please explain this in a simple way? Okay, let's see what a Penrose diagram looks like. Penrose diagram. Okay, Penrose diagram. Let's put that on the screen. Let's put that on the screen. Penrose diagrams. What are these Penrose diagrams? That's a question. Here we have a Penrose diagram. Shall we make this larger? Okay, I'll put a larger version of this on the screen, and let's try and talk about what this is. What is a Penrose diagram? What does it do? What does it talk about? So here we have a Penrose diagram. Okay, so Imagine you're trying to draw a map of the entire universe on one single piece of paper. Now we know that the observable universe is gigantic. It's got a diameter of about 93 billion light years. Enormous, right? So it is enormous. It could even be infinite, but our paper is small. Our piece of paper is small. So that's where a Penrose diagram comes in. A Penrose diagram is like a special map, and it was invented by a mathematician and physicist called Roger Penrose. And this diagram allows us to squeeze the whole universe on a single piece of paper. So here's how it works. So instead of showing actual distances like you would have on a map, I open the map all the time, right? So on a map of the earth, you actually see kilometers, right? The actual distances. So in a Penrose diagram, instead of showing those actual distances like a regular map, the Penrose diagram shows the path of light. It shows light paths. Now we know that light travels at the same speed, the speed of light. It's the speed limit in the universe. So these diagrams, Penrose diagrams, these diagrams here, they focus on how light moves through space and time. So, so using special mathematics, let's call it special mathematics, you can squeeze almost infinite distances into finite spaces on your paper. So you use the special mathematics to make things that are really far away appear really, really smaller. So the further an object is, the smaller it is depicted over here, and the furthest objects will fit on the edge of the diagram. So if you were to examine this diagram, you have space and time. Space is on the x-axis, time is on the y-axis, right? So so time goes up from bottom to top, and space spreads out horizontally from left to right, and light rays travel at a 45-degree angle. So these diagrams are very useful for showing things like black holes and the expanding universe. It helps scientists visualize what happens to light and matter in extreme places and situations where space and time get really bendy because of the way general relativity works. So it's like taking a picture of the night sky with a camera that can see everything at the same time, even the parts of the universe that are really, really almost infinitely far away. So that's what a Penrose diagram is. Now talking about black holes. So a black hole. Imagine you have a trampoline. You know, trampoline. If you want to see what a trampoline looks like, trampoline. So let's put that on the screen. Imagine you have one of these things, a trampoline. It's that thing on which you bounce, a bouncing thing. That's a trampoline. This is a trampoline. So imagine you have a trampoline, and on that trampoline you put a football or a volleyball or some kind of ball. Okay, so the trampoline will sink down. Okay, ball on trampoline. Let's look for that on trampoline. So let's say you have a ball like this on a trampoline. I mean, it will bend down actually. So it will sink down. It will, one second, general relativity. Okay, here we have a ball on a trampoline. This is a better visualization. So if you put a ball on a trampoline, the trampoline sinks down, creating a big dip. And then if you roll a marble or a small ball near the bowling ball, it will circle before falling in. Okay, just keep that image in your mind. So that's kind of like a black hole. A black hole is a place in space where gravity is so strong that nothing can escape from it, not even light. And light is the fastest thing in the universe. Okay, so that's why they're called black, because we cannot see them. They're dark. They're not dark, they're essentially invisible, because no light can come out of it. Whatever light you shine at it just sinks in, it never comes out. So black holes, how are they formed? They're formed, the black holes are formed when really big stars, much bigger than the sun, run out of fuel and collapse under their own weight, under their own gravity. And then the star's material gets squeezed into a tiny point, theoretically called a singularity, where gravity becomes incredibly super intense, and the curvature of space-time essentially becomes infinite, and even gravity becomes and the density of mass becomes infinite. And a black hole will have a boundary, and the boundary is called an event horizon. It's a point of no return. So once anything crosses that boundary, it can never come out, even light. That's a black hole. And a white hole is like a time reversed black hole. Imagine you are it's like a fountain. in space. A black hole will absorb everything. A white hole just spews out matter and light. And you can never ever throw inside anything inside a white hole. And white holes come from the same mathematical equations, the Einstein field equations of general relativity that describe black holes. So if you take the equations for black holes and you flip around the time, like watching a movie backwards, you will get white holes. But white holes are theoretical objects. Black holes have been observed and discovered. White holes, we still don't have any confirmed observation of a white hole. So we don't quite know if white holes exist. Maybe they are just theoretical mathematical constructs that come out of general relativity. But maybe they are real and we still haven't found one. So that's the deal. Hopefully it's simple enough for you to understand. Okay, Rahul Dunake says, when you fall into a black hole, how do you get stuck? How can you get stuck at the horizon for external observers, as well as pass through it until you reach the singularity? What is the truth? Right? What's the truth? So let's do this thought experiment. Let's say you are observing a black hole from far away, and your friend, who is very unwise, has decided to fall into the black hole. So you are wise, you are far away from a black hole, you're observing from a good distance, and your friend is not very wise, and he has decided to fall into the black hole. So from your perspective, you are an outside observer. You are at a safe distance. You are not going towards the black hole. You can see from far what's happening. So what do you see? You will see that as your friend goes closer and closer to the black hole's edge, the event horizon, you will see that for that person, for your friend, time seems to slow down. Your friend appears to move slower and slower. So he's falling towards the black hole. He's in a panic. He's moving, all that, right? He's waving his arms and all that. But slowly you will find that he's moving in slow motion. It's getting slower and slower. And eventually you will see him freeze. And you will see that he freezes, stops moving. He's frozen in whatever posture he is. And he never quite reaches the edge of the black hole. And then you will see that light that's coming from your friend becomes red-shifted. It becomes more and more red. It gets stretched out, and eventually it becomes invisible. So eventually you will not see your friend anymore. And from your perspective, it will look like that person never crossed the horizon. From your perspective, now let's put ourselves in the shoes of your friend. From your friend's perspective, he's falling in, and he doesn't see anything strange at the horizon. He doesn't feel anything strange at the event horizon. He passes right through the event horizon without noticing anything special. Time flows normally for him, and he keeps falling until nasty things happen. Spaghettification, getting stretched out and all that. And eventually whatever is left of him, in whatever form, reaches the center, theoretically the singularity, where it gets squeezed into nothingness. So both perspectives are right. What you see from outside is also true, and what an infalling person experiences is also true. Okay, these are two different experiences that are true at the same time. So why is it so? So imagine that you have a river that's flowing towards a waterfall. And there's a boat on the surface of the river that's going towards the waterfall. That's your friend. And from your friend's perspective, the river goes over the waterfall and falls down. But if you have a fish flowing in the river against the current, which is like a ray of light trying to escape, and the fish will keep swimming as fast as possible against the current so that it doesn't fall down, but it will just stay in the same place. It keeps swimming, but it stays in the same place because the water is going against it. So that's like a photon, a light beam trying to escape. It gets frozen in the same place. So that's kind of how it is. That's an analogy that I can give you. It's a very strange thing. Black holes are strange objects. General relativity is a strange theory. And that's why it is so fascinating and so mysterious. But yeah, you get these weird phenomena from especially when it comes to things like black holes, which are some of the most extreme objects you can ever have anywhere in the universe. Winter Teal says, what are gigantic black holes made of? Does it consume a galaxy or something to become a giant? There are various classes of black holes. There are stellar mass black holes, which are like several times the size of the sun. Then you have supermassive black holes, which are gigantic, millions of solar masses, sometimes billions of solar masses. Those are gigantic ones, okay? Big, huge, monstrous objects. And typically you have a supermassive black hole at the center of every galaxy. Most galaxies. Our galaxy, the Milky Way, has a supermassive black hole at its center, and so on. So, what are these gigantic black holes made of? So, they are made up of things they have eaten in the past. Okay, they are made up of star material, gas, all of that stuff, which falls inside. And there are objects called quasars, which are active galactic nuclei, in which you have a whirlpool of material that's falling into a black hole, and because of that, it's so luminous it can outshine entire galaxies. So you can see this process happening far, far away. All this material falling into a black hole, like a gigantic traffic jam, like a gigantic whirlpool, it eventually flows into the black hole. So it is material made of stars and whatnot. A black hole can eat a star, it can rip a star to shreds and gobble it up. So gigantic black holes are made up of all this material they have consumed in the past. How does a black hole start? It is believed, it is theorized that all supermassive black holes initially began as primordial microscopic black holes, the very early universe. And those microscopic black holes were created, they formed because of over densities of space-time. Fluctuations, quantum fluctuations in space-time, which created microscopic primordial black holes. And some of these primordial black holes, it is believed, became the seeds for future supermassive black holes. So yeah, eventually, if you want to become a black hole with millions of solar masses, you have to consume millions of star worths of material. So yeah, sometimes you may have black holes that are as massive as entire galaxies. Yeah. Okay, let's take some questions from the live chat now. I still have more questions, but I will take questions from the live chat now, next 10 or so minutes. Sham Rathore says, what's the history of martial arts in India, and is there something similar to the samurai way of honor killing? And Max assassination hitman happened in Kerala, have background in Kalari Payattu. Samurai don't have honor killings. I'm not sure when you've heard this. Honor killings is something very different, associated with a different culture. It is not associated with any dharmic culture. Samurai culture is dharmic culture, Bodh dharma. The samurai way of life is called Bushido. It's a very honorable way of life, and it's not honor killings. It's about killing for the right cause. I mean, samurai were the Japanese equivalent of the Indian Kshatriyas, and their entire life was based on this lifestyle, this set of rules called Bushido, and it's a very disciplined lifestyle, very hard lifestyle. And samurai are essentially warriors who were extremely skilled in the art and application of violence, but they did it according to a framework of rules. The rules came from Buddhist dharma. So that's what the samurai were. Now, when it comes to the history of martial arts in India, it's all lost. The history of martial arts in India is lost. We obviously would have had our own martial arts, our own systems of fighting. Some of it survives in some way, some shapes and form. Kalari Payuttu is what you have in Kerala. It is a certain martial art. And then you have something called Shastra Vidya in northern part of India, which is the Rajputic and Sikh way of fighting. Some of it still survives. And then you have some dances in Western India, sword dances that look like dances, they look like a dance, but if you see the movements, these are sword fighting movements. And then you have something called Thangta in Manipur, which is also sword fighting, very, 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 very energetic and spectacular to watch. So you have martial arts systems in Manipur, you have martial arts systems of the Rajputs, you have martial arts systems, a system called Kalari Payuttu in Kerala. And we know by now, I think most people are aware of the origins of Kung Fu. Kung Fu originated with a monk called Bodhidharma, who traveled from some part of India, perhaps southern India, to China. He was the first patriarch of the Shaolin Temple. And when he reached the Shaolin Temple, he came there. He went there as a scholar of Sanskrit. His job was going to be to translate Sanskrit sutras into Chinese. But when he reached the monastery, he discovered that it was overrun by bandits and all that. So he told the monks, listen, we'll do all the scholarly work later. Right now, let's fight off these people, these bandits, and make sure that they don't come back. So he taught the Chinese monks, an Indian system, yoga-based system of fighting. which is now called kung fu. It obviously developed and evolved further in China over the past 1500 or more years. It's now called kung fu. Its origins lie in India. So we had all these systems of martial arts. Most of these systems are lost today. Good question. I like it. Okay, let's see some more questions. Let's see, what else do we have? Ronak says, how to deal with stray dogs? They bite me for no reason when they don't fear humans. If a dog bites you, you have to immediately get the vaccination done, the rabies vaccine, whatever dosage it is, you have to get it done immediately. No questions asked. Don't ever take a chance. So that's the first thing. Now, how to deal with stray dogs? Why do they bite people when they don't fear human? I'll tell you why stray dogs bite people. Stray dogs bite people and they become aggressive towards humans when they are treated cruelly by humans. Stray dogs, see, the Indian dog is the oldest breed of dog in the world. It's the original dog. It's naturally adapted to the conditions of the Indian subcontinent, and they have coexisted with us for thousands of years. These dogs, and they are some of the most intelligent dogs and some of the most social and friendly dogs. But that said, you will find some of them are very aggressive and they bite people. And that typically happens when early in a dog's life, they are treated cruelly by various people. So then the dog decides the humans are bad. So let's bite them at the first opportunity. And obviously, dogs also have personalities. Most of them are nice, but some of them may have those criminal tendencies. So how to deal with stray dogs? Look, they have been with us for thousands of years. We cannot exterminate them. I think we need to governments, municipalities, etc., need to have their own policies for how to deal with dogs. You either neuter them or vaccinate them or something, and so on. So the main thing is be careful. Most dogs are nice, but don't take a chance, especially when you have kids and all. Be always careful around dogs, and don't ever mistreat dogs. Lots of people are, for no reason, are cruel to dogs and animals, and that's where the whole problem begins. And then sometimes you have the case of rabies. Some dogs get they get infected with rabies, and when that happens, they lose all self-control and they go on a rampage, biting everything they can bite. So yeah, that's a deal. So my main thing is, what I would say is, always be careful, always be alert. If you know a dog, you can be friends with him or her, but if you are in a new place and you see dogs there, just be a little careful. That's all. All right. Let's see what else. Shri Ramachandra Namaha says, what's my favorite language? It is Sanskrit, a language I am not that good at, but it is my favorite language because it is our civilizational mother language. Okay. Aryan says, what the hell is a wave function? How does it define an orbital? If it contains all the information of a particle, doesn't it disobey Heisenberg's uncertainty principle? Look, if I were to explain all of this properly, it will take me about half an hour with all the equations and all. But let me tell you in brief, what is a wave function? A wave function is an object, a mathematical object, and when you, it essentially tells you the probability of finding a particle at a given point in space. So it's a probabilistic thing. And when you take the square of the wave function, then that's when you get. So it essentially encodes the probability density. It's not a physical thing. It's a probability density. It represents a probability density. How does it define an orbital? Based on the probability of finding a particle in a certain portion of space, you can map out that graphically, and that is what an orbital is. So orbitals take different shapes. Hydrogen orbitals are the simplest thing. Let me show you hydrogen orbitals. Hydrogen orbitals. So depending on the various states of the hydrogen atom, you have various orbitals, the ground state, the first excited states, and so on and so forth. So these shapes are constructed based on the probability of finding the particle at a certain place in various states, ground state, n equal, then n equal to 2, and so on and so forth. So that's what I can say in brief. To explain this properly would take me much longer, and it certainly doesn't disobey Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Nothing does. Nothing does. Okay. Um, I have no idea. Amog Mehrotara says, "What is aortic stenosis?" When you talk about aortic something, you talk about the aorta, which is one of the biggest veins that we have that comes out of the heart. Aortic stenosis, I'm not really sure. Not really sure. I could Google it and find it for you, but I'm sure even you can do that. Yeah, so I'm not very sure what aortic stenosis is. Let's see some more questions. Mr. 88 says, how to make study notes more effectively? Read the topic first and then make notes, or write whatever you understand. Well, it depends on your school of thought. First thing you could do is, if you have a textbook and you're reading the textbook, the first thing is read as quickly as possible. And let's say you're reading a chapter in whatever book, in whatever textbook. First, just read the thing. Okay, don't try to force yourself to remember anything. Just read the thing as if you're reading a storybook. That's first pass. You read the textbook, the chapter once. Okay, done. Then take a break, maybe a day. Next day, you start again. This time, have a pencil in your hand. And whatever you find interesting, underline it. Whatever thoughts come to your mind, write them down in the margins or in a separate notebook. So that's your second pass. So then now you have some more information and more understanding, more context. Then you read it a third time, and then you have a better understanding of what's important, what's not. So you can make a list of bullet points that explain the whole chapter. That's what you could do. Now it depends on the subject, whether it is psychology, whether it is philosophy, whether it is physics, whether it's something else, whether it's history. Each would have a different approach, but that's what you would do. Main thing is you want to understand the gist of the chapter. You want to understand the main important points. So at the end of the day, you want to boil it down to a list of bullet points, and each bullet point you should be able to expand properly into the entire context. That's the approach that you overall should have. Karan says, how to read math books. You don't read math books. You work through the problems. A good math book is full of problems. It gives you a basic introduction of what the thing is. It gives you a couple of examples, then gives you a bunch of solved problems, and gives you a bunch of problems that you have to solve. The only way to learn mathematics, is to solve problems. There's no other way. If you think that you take a book and you're going to read it for 3 hours, just read it and you will understand it. You'll understand nothing. The only way to absorb, internalize mathematics is by solving a million problems, as many as possible. Right? Okay. Vidhi says, have you ever taken interest in research studies that indicate improvement in our cognition and brain structure due to reading or chanting Sanskrit? Are there enough studies for the same? I have read something about this in a research paper it spoke about something called the Sanskrit effect, in which they had a number of Sanskrit pandits who were chanting certain Sanskrit texts, and they were very particular about the way they recited the texts. And even the slightest mispronunciation would force them to start over from the beginning. And they would memorize large amounts of Sanskrit texts and all that. And what these researchers found was that a certain portion of their brain was about 10% larger than normal. So yeah, it does change your brain structure. And it has been discovered apparently that even just reading Sanskrit or speaking Sanskrit or essentially even reading it produces a hypnotic kind of effect on your mind, and it calms you down. So I'm not going to look up the literature right now because it will take me a lot of time, but do the research on your own if you're interested. There is indeed something called the Sanskrit effect, and there is research literature available now that kind of points in that direction, that Sanskrit has this sort of effect on the mind, on cognition. And with that, I'm going to end today's live stream. We are 2 hours and 15 minutes into it. So, yeah, end of today's session. Thank you so much for all the questions. Very interesting questions from the comments and interesting questions from the live chat as well. And let's keep doing this. And I will see you in next week's session in a week's time from now. Until then, take care, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep raising your standards. I will see you next week. Thank you. Bye bye.